Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to part 2 of my crochet color changing series. In part 1 we went over how to use the cut and tie color changing method. In part 2 we're going to cover how to use the Intarsia color changing method. I will leave the link to part 1 of this series in the description box below for anyone who may have missed it, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so to just give a brief description, the Intarsia color changing method is the process of color changing where each area of color has its own separate length of yarn. Each length of yarn is separated using either its own skein of yarn or bobbins. You can either purchase bobbins online or at the craft store, or you can make your own. I usually just separate skeins of yarn because I usually use this method when working with only 2 or 3 colors. But if you're working with more, I will usually just make my own bobbins using cardboard or mini yarn balls, which is what I've done here. I just cut off some yarn from this skein right here and made myself a little ball. And just to give an example, I made this one out of a tissue box. I just cut like a little H shape in some cardboard from a tissue box and created my own bobbin, and all you have to do is just unwind it and use it as needed. If you don't want to spend the money on bobbins, like I said, from the craft store or online from Amazon or something, you can always make your own. And with that being said, Intarsia can be super tricky when using many colors with a lot of bobbins because the yarn can become tangled, and working and turning the project can be difficult because every single time you turn the project, you're going to have to kind of maneuver all the bobbins or the skeins of yarn around to make sure that everything is in line with each color that you're using. Because like I said, each color is going to be separated by its own length of yarn. So when you're working, you're going to have to be like moving everything around, which can be super tricky. So there definitely can be some learning curves to get over and some growing pains, but like with any new technique, it just takes a little bit of time and practice to be able to master it. I also did want to mention that any technique covered in this series can be combined and used in the same project. I use multiple different color changing methods in my projects to fit each individual project. My personal favorite is to combine the cut and tie and Intarsia method. For example, I have a Christmas tree wall hanging pattern on my blog, and for the plaid part, I like to use tapestry crochets, so I will carry the yarn when working the plaid because I think it's only separated between 4 stitches, so it's 4 colors, then you change to another color, so it's just easier to use the tapestry method with that. And then the center part, I have a Christmas tree that is solid, so I use the Intarsia method with that. So I literally just leave off the center color, and then I use the tapestry method on this side. So that's just an example of how you can use multiple different color changing methods in a project. You're definitely not limited to just one, and you can definitely cater to what you're comfortable with and what is needed for the certain project that you're working on. But now that we've covered what the Intarsia method is, let's go ahead and move on to the tutorial. Okay, so to show you how to use the Intarsia method, I'm going to be working through my sun and moon mini wall hanging pattern. If you'd like to follow along with me, I do have this pattern linked in the description box. I have a free version on my blog and a printable PDF version in my Etsy shop. Alright, and before we get started, I wanted to point out something real quick, and this is probably one of the most important parts of Intarsia, is figuring out how many bobbins or how many skeins of yarn you're going to need for a project. For this specific pattern, I have charts made for both the sun and the moon panels, and for this tutorial we're going to be doing the sun panel. But before you even start a project, you want to go through and see how many colors or how many bobbins you're going to need for a certain project. So for this project, we're only going to need 3 because we're going to be working the cream color through here, the burgundy through here, and another cream color through here. So unfortunately, you can't just use one cream color and work all the way through because that would be tapestry crochet, which is totally fine. But for this specific method, you're going to have to use 3 different skeins, bobbins, or balls of yarn, for example. So for this pattern in particular, I have already created the bobbins that I need. Move this to the side so you can see. So I just have a skein of yarn that I wound up. I cut off a little bit of my burgundy for the center, and then I just cut off some of this color and wrapped it into a ball for what I think I needed. If you ever run out of a certain color, don't fret. Just tie it off or knot it off, weave it in, and then start again, or just tie it on, which is a good segue into the next part, because I wanted to show you how I start the colors. Because you know me and I love the cut and tie method, I start every Intarsia project by just tying on each color, which is why I have these 2 strings here that I will just weave in at the end. But once I get started, I'll start with the cream color, and then I'll tie on the burgundy, and you'll leave the cream color out. You will not cut or tie that off. Then you will work the burgundy color, and then tie on the new cream color, leave the burgundy to the side, don't cut it off, and then work your way through the cream method, or the cream color, I mean. And then once you're ready to turn, all you have to do is chain and then turn, and this is where the tricky part comes in, because you're gonna have to maneuver all of your bobbins so it is easier to work with, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna wrap these back up. And yeah, that is probably the most important part, is the preparation, because you don't want to work through a project and then find you don't have enough bobbins, so you're gonna have to stop and then start new bobbins, and sometimes you'll only have one color, one skein of yarn, and you're gonna have to figure out how to make a bobbin with this. Thankfully, because this is wound up, I have a little end somewhere in here, so if I were to run out of this color, I could easily just grab this one, but sometimes it's not so easy. But thankfully, most yarn balls nowadays have the option of you pulling from the center or just unwinding it. Okay, so to continue on with the pattern, according to my chart, we are going to need to do 6 cream, 18 burgundy, and another 6 cream. So to do that, we're just going to pick up our cream color that's right here and pull out some yarn. All right. Then we're going to work 6 cream, all right, and once we get to the 6th one, just like every color change, we are going to do an unfinished single crochet, and we're going to just leave that onto the side, just the side where our bobbin is, just to make things a little bit more organized. Then we are going to attach the burgundy and then work our 18 burgundy. And before I get too far into it, I like to give my previous color a little tug just to make sure everything is nice and tight in there, because when you're color changing and you don't remember to kind of give your ends a little bit of a tug, you can kind of see them throughout the project. You'll see some raised parts. So it's always a good idea, in my opinion, just to give them a little tug to keep things nice and neat. And again, I am so sorry for my squeaky crochet hook. I will get a new one, I promise. I'll probably order one off of Amazon when I'm done with this video. Because it is so irritating. Like, ugh. I wish I could mute it on the video, but I am not that tech savvy yet. Maybe one day I'll figure it out. All right, and then once we come to the 18th stitch, we are going to do an unfinished or uncompleted single crochet. Move that yarn out of the way, pick up our next cream, finish off that single crochet, and then continue on. All right, and like we did before we get too far, we're gonna give that burgundy just a tiny little tug just to make sure everything is nice and neat, and finish out the row. All right, and this is probably the most simple Intarsia method you could use. Like I said, if you're working with multiple different colors, it's definitely going to be a little bit more challenging. For the other side, I usually do it the same way, except I'll move my yarn forward instead of backward just to make sure that the right side of the work is nice and clean. If you're changing colors and you are having to like skip a color right here, so if you're skipping this first burgundy stitch or using cream and then going to this next burgundy stitch, but your burgundy tie is here, all you have to do is kind of lightly pull it over. Let me see if I can show you. Just as an example. And again, we're just gonna have to maneuver some stuff around. Get everything nice and organized. Okay, and for example, this part in the pattern doesn't come up, I think, for another row or 2 rows. But instead of working 6 single crochet in this color, we're gonna work 7, so I can show you how to change the color when it's just 1 off. So we'll do 6 and then 7, do an uncompleted single crochet. We're gonna toss that off to the side. Actually, we're gonna bring it forward. Keep everything nice and neat. No, yes. Now I'm confusing myself. And you're just gonna lightly tug on that color, not too tight because you don't want to cinch the project, and just complete it. All right, and then just kind of work your way back through. Right, but that is not the pattern, so I'm gonna take this out and then we'll keep going with the original pattern just to show you how I kind of maneuver things around on the wrong side. All right, so we're gonna do that 6th cream color, leave it as an uncompleted single crochet. Move that forward into the side. I always kind of move it underneath my arm like this. Finish that off. All right, and another thing, when you do it like that, your first stitch can kind of be hidden. So make sure when you're following like a chart or a pattern that you're counting the stitches, is so you are not skipping one, because I don't know if you can see that, but this yarn piece is kind of laying over top of that first stitch. So make sure you are counting your stitches so you don't miss one. Right, we are going to finish that off, and then like all the rest of the color changes, I'm just going to give that a nice tug just so it's nice and clean on the other side. Finish off 18 burgundy. Okay, and reach the 18th stitch as an uncompleted single crochet. Move that burgundy over, pick up the cream, finish off that burgundy color. Make sure you're finding that first stitch. Finish off that single crochet and give this a little tug, and then finish it off. All right, and that is pretty much it. And like I said, when you run out of yarn, for me personally, it's just easier to tie everything on. So let's say you have run out of this cream bobbin, and you run out about here-ish. So all you would have to do is tie on a new cream color and then just keep working your way, and then just weave in your ends. Because for me personally, whenever I kind of hook new colors on, I get a little bit of a wonky tension. Like I said previously, I am a very tight crocheter, so if I'm not careful with how I attach yarn or kind of carry yarn, it can get really cinched up and kind of not cute. So yeah, that's just a preferably an easier way to attach new colors if you run out. All right, and I think that is it. Thank you so much for watching part 2 of my crochet color changing series. If this was helpful for you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified when I upload part 3 of this series. And if you'd like to follow me on social media and see what I'm up to and what projects I have coming up, all the links will be in the description box. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or contact me on any of my social media channels. And I will see everyone in part 3. Bye!